The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the next webinar in our series for our community resources guide. That's the supplement to the chemicals management module of the Higg Index. My name is Beth Jensen. I'm Director of Corporate Responsibility for Outdoor Industry Association, and I spearhead our chemicals management working group that put together the chemicals management module of the Higg Index and this resources guide that we call Community. And Nimkartek, who will be our presenter today, is one of 6 tool providers that we started with really to try to map out kind of how these different providers can help you and your businesses complete the chemicals management module of the Higg Index. So the idea behind this series of webinars is really just to provide a bit of color directly from the service provider themselves around the information that they provided for that resources guide, and then also to allow anyone who would like to ask questions of the service provider live here as well. And these will all be recorded. So like the rest of the webinars in this series, this webinar will be recorded and filed on both on outdoorindustry.org as well as on the Outdoor Industry Association Sustainability Working Group iMeet Central platform in a library of resources for future reference for our members. So with that, I will turn it over to Prasad, and he is with Nimkartek, and he'll give a relatively brief 15 or 20-minute presentation here, providing a little bit more color on the Nimkartek solution, and then we'll allow a bit of time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. So Prasad, take it away.
Thank you, Beth, and many thanks to the OIA Chemical Management Working Group for giving me this opportunity to present our web-based chemical management tool, which we call as CMS-i. I am Prasad Pant. I am working as the CEO of Nimkartek. And before we begin, I would just like to show a quick slide about our company. Nimkartek provides following 4 main services in the field of chemical management. Number 1 is to create and update chemical policy documents such as RSLs or MRSLs of brands. We also provide training to all stakeholders in the supply chain through our e-learning platform as well as in-person trainings. We do what we call as pre-audits or baseline assessments of Tier 2 facilities for their chemical management systems, and provide guidance to dye houses or garment laundries or leather tanneries to implement systems for chemical management. And one such tool to do this is the CMS-i that I will be describing to you now. So let's straight get to the point. What is CMS-i? Well, this is an online or web-based tool to provide guidelines on key elements of a chemical management system. The CMS well, stands for Chemical Management System, and the I actually stands for 3 things: instructions, implementation, and improvement. So who can use this tool? Well, the primary users are, of course, the supplier facilities such as fabric mills or garment laundries or printers or tanneries, where this tool helps to kickstart their journey on chemical management. Since it provides a framework on the systems that are needed and can be implemented in a step-by-step manner. Brands or retailers can also use this tool to provide data on current setup at a vendor, as well as measure the improvements which have been made using this tool. This is basically through the pre-assessment and the reassessment steps of the tool. Now, CMS-i goes beyond only self-assessment, which is the domain of the Higg Index Chemical Management Framework. There are basically 3 stages. The stage 1 is what we call as pre-assessment, which establishes a baseline of the facilities systems for chemical management systems. So this is a little bit overlapping with the Higg Index Chemical Management Framework questionnaire. Then we have the stage 2, which is the implementation and support, and here we provide actions and guidelines for improvements at the facility in the field of chemical management. And the third is, this is followed by the reassessment step, which helps to measure the improvements made. So the pre-assessment is done through an online questionnaire where the facility has to self-rate itself on a scale of 1 to 5. On completing this questionnaire, a summary report along with best industry practices for each indicator covered in the questionnaire is mailed to the participating facility. The implementation is through a set of guideline documents that are downloaded by the facility, and the actions given therein are to be implemented by them. Nimkartek offers a 24/7 online assistance through mail, phone, as well as webinars during this implementation phase. Once all the actions in the guideline documents have been completed by the facility, it can log in for a reassessment questionnaire, which comprises of the same questions as in the pre-assessment. However, in the reassessment questionnaire, the facility has to upload certain completed forms in some questions. Based on the self-ratings in the pre-assessment as well as the reassessment, a graphical matrix is generated by the tool to map the improvements made in each key performance indicator by the facility. So this is an overall or an overview of the CMS-i process. Now let me tell you the scope of the CMS-i. It is primarily, as I said, a tool to provide guidelines on chemical management systems as a framework of ready-made forms and formats for practical implementation by a supplier facility. It is really a starting point of engagement between the internal stakeholders of a facility and its buyers and suppliers of chemicals and raw materials. The CMS-i is not just a self-assessment tool or a compliance tool or a vendor evaluation tool. It is neither a tool that can screen chemicals for hazards, nor is it a certification process. The CMS-i covers the following key elements of chemical management through its guideline documents, which are downloaded by the facility during the implementation phase. These are simple Word documents or Excel worksheets that contain detailed information and instructions, which are to be read, understood, and implemented by the facility. So major areas such as chemical management team, chemical management manual, purchasing practices, regulatory requirements, risk assessment of chemicals, how to secure declarations of conformance to restricted substances from chemical and raw material suppliers, how to design a good testing protocol to monitor restricted substances in raw materials, finished products, and wastewater, how to communicate hazards through labeling and signages on chemical containers, how to do internal audits for continuous monitoring of chemical management systems, and MIS or Management Information System reporting is all given through this tool to the facility to implement. So this is the landing page of the CMS-i. The access is through a username and password after clicking the web link www.cmsi.nimkartek.in. A new user has to register first, get approval, make the payment through bank transfer, after which he is granted the login credentials. After logging in, the user will land on this dashboard. Usually, the user is given 60 days of login to complete the entire three-step process. However, this is a flexible period. We can extend this if it is required. The number of days remaining is seen here for 59 days. Reports after the pre and reassessments are mailed to the user immediately on completion of the questionnaire. And the downloading and implementation of guideline documents is done in 3 stages so as to space out the actions to be completed by the facility. Let me now show you some snapshots of each tab since it would be impossible for me to explain everything in about 20 minutes that Beth has given us. The first tab is the facility information. Here, basic information about the facility, such as production details, substrate details, source of inlet water, waste management, legal permits and licenses and certifications are all filled in by the facility. In some cases, such as say legal permits and licenses, the facility has to upload or attach a copy of certain documents. After filling in this information, the user moves to the pre-assessment tab. This pre-assessment tab is divided into 4 sections: regulatory compliance, product chemicals knowledge, process chemicals knowledge, and wastewater treatment. So each of this section has a set of questions which comprise certain key performance indicators and a rating parameter which the facility has to complete. Now here is a snapshot of a question from the regulatory compliance section in the pre-assessment. Each question has to be answered as a yes or no, and if the answer is yes, then the facility has to give a self-rating on a scale of 1 to 5. And this scale of 1 to 5 is also explained that it depends upon the degree of compliance that the facility feels or knows that it is complying with respect to this question. A rating of 1 means the facility is complying to that performance indicator as around 0 to 20%, while a rating of 5 means the facility is compliant to that indicator between 80 to 100%. In case the answer is a no, then the rating is 0. In some questions, the facility will be requested to upload certain documents to support their self-rating. Now, this upload is voluntary. It is at the time of doing this questionnaire, they may upload later, or the facility can upload the document immediately by choosing the file from their hard disk. So once the pre-assessment is completed, the facility will automatically receive a report summarizing the ratings which have been given by the facility. Also, each question will describe the best industry practice that is required to be followed by the facility. So this document can be kept as a reference by the facility before it embarks on the implementation phase. The facility then moves to the implementation phase, which I had told you is divided into 3 stages, each stage covering certain elements of a chemical management system. Guideline documents are to be downloaded in each stage, and the actions mentioned therein are to be implemented by the facility. So the onus of implementation of these actions is on the facility, but we give online support from Nimkartek. So let me get into the stage 1 of the implementation phase. Here is a snapshot of the download documents and the guidelines that we basically help them to implement in this stage are global legislations on chemicals in textiles, how to have a chemical management team with defined roles and responsibilities, how to get declarations of conformance to the restricted substances requirements from chemical suppliers as well as raw material suppliers, and how to establish purchasing practices so as to ensure that the chemicals and raw materials purchased are compliant to the restricted substances requirement. Just to give you a little idea of how a guideline document looks, I have shown you here a snapshot of the supplier declaration guideline document and the actions to be taken therein to develop a list of substances of concern. Due to time constraint, I'm not able to explain everything, but this is how it will. It looks at it's a Word document which gives you a step-by-step process as to how you can get a supplier declaration with standard formats. The next stage, the stage 2 of the CMS implementation, also gives guideline documents on certain other aspects of chemical management, and they include testing plan for raw materials, risk assessment of chemical inventory, what control measures are needed to be taken based on the risk assessment for storage, handling, disposal of chemicals, and how to label chemical containers to communicate hazards. So here is a snapshot of the labeling guideline document. The last stage of the CMS implementation contains the following guideline documents: how to build a chemical management manual, how to implement MIS reports so that the top management of the facility and every team member is aware of the actions taken on chemical management, a wastewater testing plan, and internal audit checklist for chemical management systems. Here is a snapshot of a guideline document from stage 3. This is on the testing plan for water treated in an effluent treatment plant, how to draw the samples, from where to draw the samples, how to maintain the record of the testing data, and what corrective actions are required in case of any discrepancies. So once all the documents in the 3 stages of the implementation phase have been downloaded, then we have the facility has to go into the reassessment, which is again an online questionnaire. The reassessment process comprises of the same set of questions which have been asked in the pre-assessment step, and the facility has to now give a self-rating on a scale of 1 to 5, along with uploading of certain guideline document formats which they have downloaded and implemented during the stages 1, 2, and 3 of the implementation phase, which I showed you earlier. The tool then generates a graphical matrix of the ratings given by the facility during the pre and the reassessment questionnaire stages. This helps the facility as well as the brand or retailer to quickly map the improvements which have been made in the key performance indicators for implementation of chemical management systems at that facility. Now let me explain how CMS-i can help you with the Higg Index Chemical Management Framework, or CMF. We all know that the Higg Index CMF is divided into 7 sections and has 3 action levels: foundational, progressive, and aspirational. The CMS-i tool can help to achieve improvements from framework indicators in the first 5 sections, but not in the last 2 sections. That is, safer alternatives assessment and sustainable chemistry innovation and continuous improvement is not included as part of the CMS-i. In all these 5 sections, the CMS-i tool can be applied at all the 3 action levels, that is foundational, progressive, and aspirational. So let me explain this in the remaining 5-7 minutes that I have. The improvements in chemical management systems is effected through guideline documents that the facility downloads and implements in the implementation stages 1, 2, and 3. So the regulatory awareness and compliance indicators of the Higg Index are covered by the guideline document Global Chemical Requirements for Compliance. This document gives information about laws on restricted substances in consumer goods in the EU, USA, China, Korea, Turkey, Taiwan, Egypt, and other countries. It also provides website links and a list of substances that are regulated in these countries. So with this knowledge from this guideline document, the facility can set up its own system to monitor and verify compliance with these regulations. The second section of the Higg Index CMF, that is restricted substances and substances of concern, contains various indicators under the two levels, foundational and progressive. The internal point of contact for RSL compliance can be implemented through the guideline document chemical management team and its roles and responsibilities. The RSL verification and updation is done through the document supplier declarations for RSL MRSL conformance. For integrating RSL requirements into purchasing contracts, the document purchasing practices for chemical compliance is given. And for RSL compliance documentation and corrective actions for non-compliance, the guideline document testing protocol for monitoring restricted substances in raw materials and finished products is useful. To help the facility to go beyond RSLs, the risk assessment guideline document is helpful. For the third section in the Higg Index CMF, which is products and process chemicals knowledge, various indicators falling under the three levels, foundational, progressive, and aspirational, are covered by two guideline documents. One is the chemical management team, and the other document is risk assessment of chemical inventory and control measures. The last indicator, which falls in the aspirational level, is not covered by the CMS-i tool. The fourth section, which is chemical hazard assessment, has mainly four indicators, one each under foundational and progressive and two under aspirational. All these indicators can be implemented using the guideline documents of the CMS-i tool, which are chemical management team, supplier declarations for conformance, risk assessment of chemicals, and purchasing practices for chemical compliance. The fifth section also has indicators for foundational, progressive, and aspirational. I have represented these as F, P, and A. Two indicators are not covered by the CMS-i guideline documents, while the rest can be implemented using documents on chemical management manual, labeling system to communicate hazards, risk assessment of inventory and control measures, and purchasing practices for chemical compliance. So using these guideline documents, all these KPIs in this section can be covered. So that was a quick overview of the CMS-i tool. I hope I kept within the time limit given by Beth. I'm now open to any questions that may have come to your mind, or if you want any explanation on a specific point. Over to you, Beth.
Okay, thank you so much, Prasad.
Thank you.
Yes, and thanks so much, especially for outlining the specifics around how this tool works together with the 7 primary objectives and some of the specific questions within the chemicals management module, or the chemicals management framework, as it's also called. So I don't see any questions coming through right now. I will just give it one more minute for folks to ask questions. But yeah, the other point to mention here again is that the details of specifically how the Nimkartek CMS-i tool fits within the first 5 primary objectives of the chemicals management framework, as Prasad outlined. The details of that are in the community guide, which is also posted in Central Desktop, or what's now called iMeet Central, for the Sustainability Working Group, as well as on our outdoorindustry.org website, in our chemicals management toolkit on the oia.org website as well, outdoorindustry.org, I should say, website. So more details are there if you'd like to dig in specifically to the details around how this tool fits together with the chemicals management framework. So
great.
I'm going to check and make sure there aren't any other questions, and it doesn't look like there are. So with that, we can just end the webinar, and you see Prasad's contact information here. so on the screen. So if you do have more specific questions, please feel free to reach out to him. And again, this webinar was recorded. So if you have colleagues who weren't able to attend tonight, we will have this recorded and in our library online. So thanks again, Prasad, for the presentation, and thanks to everyone who attended, and have a good one.
Thank you. Thanks a lot from our side.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.